Is this a ghostly encounter? Perhaps. Or perhaps it's a concrete indicator of the awful tricks fear can play on the mind. It's rather long, in any case. When I was 3, my grandfather sold my dad his house, since he and my grandmother were moving to a condominium. The basement was somewhat finished, so my dad completed the job with a bedroom and a bathroom, along with the section that had the laundry tubs, furnace, and some cabinets. My brother, who was 11 years older than me, and I shared that bedroom. When I was 7, my brother went off to the Air Force, so I got the bedroom to myself. Like any kid in that sort of situation, I missed my brother, but was terribly excited about my new domain. That excitement didn't last long. My nights morphed immediately into an undeniable hell. Some of this so-called hell was likely initiated by common childhood fear. For example, for hours after my bedtime, I'd sneak upstairs and peer around the corner, confirming that my parents had unpacked their bags and had left me in the house to rot among the apparent evil I was experiencing nightly. Things like this, thinking your parents are going to leave you alone, were explainable. Others weren't. I would often lie awake in bed and see a swoosh of colors above and around me. Eventually, I'd feel as though I was a tiny object in a massive room. Along with this feeling came a dreadful feeling of helplessness, and I was always paralyzed, fearful to move, fearful to think, fearful to do anything. Accompanying this were sounds beyond my closed door that were always the same. They sounded like a block of wood scraping against the concrete floor. This happened almost every night. When I think back on it now, I probably look like Danny did in The Shining when he'd see things and shake. Others here talk of the reflex-like behavior of retreating beneath the sheets. I was never able to move out of pure fear. If I moved, this whole thing would somehow get me. Perhaps the most odd sensation I remember throughout these visions and feelings was one of me holding a small football. Despite the fact I felt I was approximately the size of a football itself, it was always the football. This continued for months, but I was afraid to tell my parents. After all, I didn't want to lose my basement domain. My older sister had the bedroom on the 2nd floor, right next to my parents, and I certainly didn't want that. So I trudged on through the terrifying nights until it got even worse. The only windows in the basement were glass block, which let only a ghastly sunlight in during daytime and absolutely nothing in terms of moonlight at night. This, of course, gave you the feeling that you were in that basement for good and that you were in the ground. One night, I was awakened by the sound of something incredibly massive striking that glass block once. I'm not talking about someone kicking it or someone striking it with a rock. It sounded like a massive body ran full force into the window, a sickening thud that would have killed anything or anyone. I didn't hear anything else that night, and of course, when I checked outside the next morning, nothing was there, nor was there any sign of anything hitting the window or otherwise disturbing the premises. In the middle of the night, a few weeks later, I woke to my mother's cries. There I was, sitting on the stairs, leading not to the 1st floor, but to the 2nd floor, a half-clean puddle of vomit at my feet. My mother was crying and cleaning, asking why I didn't tell her I was sick. At this point, I told her about everything that was happening, and the next day, they promptly switched the bedrooms of my sister and I. Nothing of the sort ever happened to her. When I was a cocky teenager years later, I moved back down to the basement. I remember purposely walking the hall between the bedroom and the laundry area the first night, telling whatever the hell was down there that I'd kick its loving rear end if it even thought of pulling that crap again. Lucky for that blathering idiot, nothing else happened. When I was a senior in college, that same feeling came back one night. This time, I wasn't afraid of it. I encouraged it and tried to figure out what the hell it was. There I was, a tiny being in a cavernous room, vulnerable to everything around me. And yes, the football was there. It was extremely intense, but I still can't explain it. Either whatever is in that ground around that basement stayed with me, or I messed myself up permanently through pure fear. Who knows? I worked at a psych hospital here in New Hampshire for a year. It was one of the worst jobs I've ever had, but it provided me with some pretty messed up stories to tell. As you might imagine, places like psychiatric hospitals are pretty turbulent places. I was hired, despite my lack of psych training, because I was big and a little bit intimidating. They needed people like me on the adult and adolescent units because these were very violent times. It was 1999, 9 months before Y2K, and only a few weeks before Columbine, so the lunatics were coming out of the woodwork. We had apocalypse freaks, people who swore they had psychic powers, and the government was trying to kill them. We had a Columbine wannabe admitted once or twice a week. There were also some of the roughest, most violent patients that the hospital had ever hosted. They needed people like me to sort of keep the peace and take the violent people down so nurses would stop getting hurt. The kids liked me, so the hospital director put me on the adolescent unit a lot. The adolescent unit turned out to be the home of a few spooks. After lights go out, each hallway, boys' hall and girls' hall, was watched over by a counselor. I was sitting in a chair in the boys' hall. My job was to make sure no one was up and moving around and that people were going to sleep. If I heard anyone talking, I was to shut them up. You can tell where this is going. I'm flipping through my book when I hear voices in one of the rooms. It's just muffled, but I have to get up and check it out anyway. I start to get nervous when I hear the voices coming from an empty room. It was a quiet week on the unit, and only half of the boys' bedrooms were occupied. I opened the door, expecting to find a couple of kids in there, since I heard two voices, but find an entirely empty room. The talking continued, right up until the point when I opened the door. As soon as it opened, the talking stopped. I closed the door, go back to my chair, chilled right down to the bone. That was pretty creepy. I hear more talking, but decide that it can't be from that room, so I start going room to room. Everyone is out like a light. The talking is still coming from that room. After my shift was over, I went out for a beer with the nurses and other counselors and told them about it. That was some sort of initiation for me, I guess. They talked about how everyone has had some sort of weird experiences on the unit. It's like a rite of passage. I heard stories about the quiet room in the girls' hall. Sometimes girls in the neighboring bedroom hear screaming and pounding on the walls when there's no one in the quiet room. I was told about a figure of a man that can be seen, and I did see him walking in the halls on the adult unit. You always catch him out of the corner of your eye, but when you turn to look at him fully, there's no one there. The head nurse told me about a child in the adolescent unit seeing someone hanging by a belt in their bathroom. The head nurse once told me about a child on the adolescent unit seeing someone hanging by a belt in their bathroom. The staff checked it out and calmed the hysterical kid, but found nothing. The kicker? A kid hung himself by a belt from the shower curtain rod a year prior. For this reason, breakaway curtain rods were now installed in each room, and no one was allowed to wear belts. A massive bloodstain was found on the floor of a girl's bedroom once by a counselor doing checks in the hall. She ran to get the staff, thinking someone bled to death on the floor. They all ran down to their room in rubber gloves, and everyone saw the stain. The girls occupying the room should have been in the gymnasium, and some of the staff went to find them. Like they should have been, both girls were in the gym, perfectly fine. When the nurses went back to the room, the stain was completely gone. When I was a kid, We lived in a fairly large house in the middle of Fort Collins. Nothing particularly weird happened in the house until my 7th birthday. On that day, I had a dream of a little girl who died of some strange illness. In the dream, I was walking through the strange looking hallway with a creepy floral pattern wallpaper. Anyway, I eventually turned into a room, and there is a bunch of people and a priest standing over a bed with a small girl laying in the bed. Everyone is crying and sobbing, and the priest is reading stuff out of the Bible he had in his hands. I walked up to the side of the bed and looked at the girl, and then the man that was standing next to me. I looked up at his face, and he stared back at me and screamed, "Why, God? Why did you make her sick?" That scene is stuck in my mind so vividly that I could draw every feature on that man's face to this day. Anyway, after I had the dream, strange things started happening. Chairs would move around, not get stacked into a pyramid, a la Poltergeist. Doors would open and close, and we would hear giggling. Things like that. A few times we would come home, and every single cabinet door in the house would be wide open, with all the contents of the cabinets pushed up to the front and stacked in perfect columns, labels out, mind you. Also, one night, while I was having a particularly hard time sleeping, I opened my eyes to see a small girl, the same girl from my dream, dressed in a white nightgown, standing at the foot of my bed, smiling at me. I closed my eyes and quickly reopened them to see if the girl had gone away, but this time she was extending her arm to me with something in her hand. At this point, I had no idea what to do, so I did what any 7-year-old would do. I quickly pulled the sheets over my head and curled up into a ball. I laid there for a second, thinking that I was just having a really messed up dream. Suddenly, I felt the bed compact, as if someone had sat on it. At this point, I'm making GBS threads myself. I'm not sure why I thought it was a good idea to rip the covers off of me and quickly stand up, but I did anyway. The small girl had moved around to the side of my bed and was just sitting there, smiling at me. She reached into a pocket of her gown and pulled out a small trinket that looked like a small horse. She looked up at me and mouthed something, but I couldn't hear her. She extended her hand and offered the small horse to me. I just stood there, in my pajamas, in the middle of the bed, completely dumbfounded. Right as I was about to reach to get the horse from the little girl, the light flickered on in my room, promptly causing the little girl to look towards the door, then back at me. My dad had turned on the light and was looking at me strange. Then he noticed the little girl. His exact words were, "What the hell is going on in here? Who the hell are you? And why are you in my son's room?" After he finished his little outburst, the girl got up from my bed, smiled at me, and put the horse back in her pocket. I can't really describe what happened next, but she kind of half disappeared, half blended into the wall. Anyway, it creeped both my dad and myself out, and we spent the next week sneaking around the house together, trying to see her again. After the little bed incident, the little girl would start taking her stuff. Her favorite thing to do was to take the remote to the TV and hide it in the closet of my parents' room. Another of the girl's favorite things to do was to take my toy trucks and send them rolling across the floor for hours. When we tried to take the toy trucks away and put them somewhere else, the trucks would be promptly back at scooting along the floor. That's my little ghost story. We never saw the little girl again, nor did we ever find out who she is or what the little horse was. I moved into my house in 1991 when my mother married my stepfather, who has since died, but that's another story. His ex-wife before my mother died in the house in 1990 due to cancer. That's the room my mother sleeps in now. He was also a big animal lover, and numerous animals had died in the house and are now buried in our backyard. Since we moved in, I've heard numerous strange noises, creaking floorboards, knocking in the walls, whispering, scratching from the attic, etc. Our attic has insulation everywhere, including on the floor, because it isn't a real attic, but merely a small storage area. I hate being alone in the house at night, as does my mother, and my sister does as well, but she's moved out now. If you're sitting quietly, it constantly feels as though someone is with you. Just the other night, I was in the living room, reading, and my cat was lying on the top of the couch, behind my head, sleeping. Suddenly, it felt as though someone had come and stood right next to my ear. If you put your hand by your right ear, that's how it felt, like someone's blocking my hearing. Quite unnerving. I glanced at my cat, and she was staring wide-eyed at the exact spot it felt like someone was standing. Needless to say, I went to bed. When I'm in my room at night, it feels like someone's watching me, or at least like someone's there. I just bury my head under the covers and wish a quick descent into sleep. The weirdest thing that's happened is the whispering. My house is a tri-level. If someone is in the basement, talking, you could hear it through the vents in the upper floor. Well, one night, I'm lying in bed, trying to sleep, and I hear a woman's voice. It sounded muffled, like she was whispering. I figured it was my sister talking on the phone downstairs, but when I checked, she was in her room, sleeping. When I asked my mom and sister if they noticed anything strange in the house, my sister said she also heard the whispering. Totally creepy. Anyone who comes to my house and stays the night feels unnerved. Most people don't like it there. I know I don't. It wouldn't be any big deal. When I felt that tugging on my hair as I was trying to sleep one night, I kind of freaked out. Also, my mom had woken up in the middle of the night, and she felt like someone crawled into bed behind her. She thought it was her cat, since the cat usually sleeps with her. The cat was on the floor sleeping though. My mom just shut her eyes and went back to bed. Let's see, what else has happened? When my stepfather was still alive, my mom was doing the dishes and she felt a hand on her shoulder. She turned around, expecting to see my SF, but no one was there. She said she didn't feel threatened, but she didn't like it anyway. The week my stepfather died, my sister said she woke up one night and saw him in the hallway, waving. She slept with her door closed after that. She also said that she saw green lights in the very downstairs part of our house. The room where the cats have their food dishes and litter box is one of the scariest rooms in the house. Our dog wouldn't go in there. He refused, even though we tried to force him sometimes. The cats never seemed to have a problem with it, though, but I just think that's because they have to go in, or they'll just starve to death. I was reading one day on my bed. I had my back to the doorway and was facing the wall. I felt something jump up on the bed. The bed shook, and I turned around, expecting to see my cat. Nothing was there. I checked under the bed. Nothing. All the cats, we have 3, were in the living room, asleep. I knew several cats who have died in my room, so that creeped me out. My room has completely changed since this happened, but I'll try to explain so you understand. There is a small window in my room, which was just put in a few years ago. Before that, there was just a solid wall. Anyway, I was sitting in bed, watching TV, when I heard knocking in the wall. The kind of knocking you expect to hear on your front door. I put my ear to the wall, and there was definitely a knocking noise directly where my ear was. My room is on the 2nd floor, and the spot where the noise was emanating could only be reached from the outside by a ladder because it's pretty far up. Since it was late at night, I doubt someone was on a ladder knocking on the side of the house. It stopped a couple of minutes later, and I haven't heard anything like that since, especially since there's a small window there now, and my bed is not in that spot anymore. Also, the scratching I hear is coming from the attic, and it's really odd. It usually only happens when I feel a presence very heavily in my room. So, there you have it. All my creepy experiences, all wrapped into one. Well, hope you enjoyed these ghost stories. They really terrified the living hell out of me. I don't know why I still live in the house, but I guess we have no choice. If you ask me, even though they are my step-parents, they still scare the living hell out of me. In a way, we should take this as a good sign. that the afterlife is strong and there are people that cross over to the other side. One thing is definitely true. Ghosts do exist. They're terrifying. They might seem innocent, but it's always terrifying for me. Hey Phantoms, it's me, Phantom of Darkness. Who else would it be? It would probably be Phantom of Darkness. Wait, I just said that. Ha! You're not funny. Go away. I'm talking about myself. Go away, Phantom. Go, 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 go. Sorry guys, I'm running on 0 hours of sleep and maybe 2 minutes of love. So I can't really function, well, let's be honest here, I can't function at all. If you guys would like to support the channel, go ahead and comment, go ahead and like, go ahead and share, go ahead and subscribe, and if you want to donate to my Patreon, you can go ahead, but you can't go behind. My brain is mush right now, but anyway, thank you guys so much again for tuning into this wonderful story session with Phantom of Darkness. Gonna go eat some pineapples under the sea or something, I don't know, maybe chill out with, SpongeBob, Patrick, Starfish King, and just see where life takes me, guys. Why is there no difference between me getting 0 amounts of sleep and me getting like 8 hours of sleep? I really never make any sense. Okay, guys, seriously. Comment, like, subscribe, share. I meant to say I love you guys, and I'll see you in the next video, but yeah, we'll just use that. Bye.